All right, once again, it's about 1 o'clock. If everyone doesn't mind bearing with me, we're going to give just a little bit more time to allow more committee members and as well maybe members of the public a few more minutes to join in. At this point, probably anticipate getting started at about 1:03. If we could do one thing, if our advisory committee members that have come in through our attendee list, if you could actually just do a quick thumbs up, our IT staff would like to make sure that we get you over into the panelist category, please. Either a quick thumbs up, or I'm sorry, or even just raise your hand in the in your screen. Um, And that way our support team can get you over in the correct spot. And apologize for that. We'll have just a slight delay as we get our members over into the panelist list. We'll give that just about one more minute, and then we will get started. Sorry for the slight delay there, but we will get started at right around 1:05. And Stacy, were we able to get that change? Get some of those members over into the panel list?
Yeah, if there's any other members, go ahead and raise your hand. I think I got them all, but just in case, raise your hand if you're still an attendee, but you need to be a panelist. I can move you on over.
And Stacy, once in case we have somebody that comes in maybe a little bit late, at some point in the presentation, if you don't mind doing a quick text or interrupting Claire or I between sections of the presentation, and we'll do that announcement one more time to make sure if any of the members come in just a few minutes late after we begin, we can get them moved over to panelists as well.
Sure thing.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to do a quick final refresh and we'll get started here in just a moment. All right. Well, we've gone just about past 1:05, so we are going to go ahead and get started on this look back on CREP program with the advisory committee for the second quarter of 2023, and then looking ahead into the third quarter of what the program is working on and the upcoming events. Just wanted to take a quick moment and introduce myself. My name is Jason Knaus. I'm one of the program analysts for the Community Renewable Energy Grant Program. And before we get going, I just want to reintroduce to the committee. We do have, I believe, one new committee member here today, but I wanted to let our team introduce themselves, and then we'll get moving into some other quick meeting details before our brief presentation. Clay, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hello from Bend, everybody. This is Clay Deckert. I am an incentives analyst dedicated to the Community Renewable Energy Grant Program.
Wonderful. And I think Pandian, is Pandian joining us as well today?
Welcome, everyone. My name is Pandian Krishnaswamy. I'm Incentives Programs Manager. Thanks for joining us.
All right, wonderful. And we'll go ahead and just jump into the first slide, go over some meeting details. Just wanted to make sure we let everybody know that today's meeting is being recorded and it will be posted online for reference, followed up maybe a day or two after this meeting. We do want to ask that please feel free to use the chat to ask questions. We do have an Odo team here that will be monitoring those. If you do have a question, please use the raise hand function, and we'll do a quick review of the WebEx screen here in just a moment. And that just helps to indicate that you have a question or a comment. And for our public attending today, we do have time set aside at the end of both the presentation and the committee discussion. We'll be taking on your questions and comments. If you have one already, feel free to go ahead and put that in the chat, and our team will keep track of those, but we will get to those and address them at a latter part of this meeting. And first off, are there any questions on how to use WebEx for this meeting for anybody? And Clay, if you'll go to the next screen, which has some of the information there. Maybe take a look at this real quick. If there's any of those areas, this layout will help you with using the microphone, using the emojis or the hand raise functions, as well as the chat feature. We'll leave that up for just one moment. Okay, Clay, let's go ahead and move on to our next slide, please. As always, just like to do a brief review of how this meeting is going to be facilitated today. Our panelists during this time are going to be our advisory committee members, as well as the CREP team and our Odo staff members. And participants, which is our public attending today. As I said before, there will be time reserved at the end of today's agenda for comment. And you can pre-send those questions via chat or during that time as well. As always, we do like to facilitate these meetings under a community agreement that is designed to foster inclusive and respectful meeting today. And we do ask all of our attendees to please be present and ready to learn, be respectful to others. We often find learning happens outside of our comfort zones, and so it's very important to listen to learn and not always just to respond. And in addition, as always, if we have a technical issue pop up, we do thank you for your flexibility, for being patient as we try to correct those in progress. If you have a technical issue, please go ahead and contact Stacy in the chat, and we'll see if we can get that solved for you during the presentation. So thank you for that. Claire, if we could go ahead and go to the next slide, please. And in our agenda for today, as we're doing right now, doing our welcome meeting details, and then in just a moment, we're going to get into the team program updates for both rounds 1 and 2, as well as a quick look at what's being worked on for the upcoming round 3. And then we also are going to just do a quick review of the latest legislative session and the funding items for this program that came out of that session. And then following that, as always, we'll have our committee feedback for questions as well as a topic for discussion. And then, as I said earlier, we'll get into having time available for the public before we close today's meeting out. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Clay for a brief review of rounds 1 and 2.
All right, thank you, Jason. So the program update memo that was sent out on June 30th to all advisory committee members has the latest detailed information about CREP rounds 1 and 2 and some of the other topics that Jason will discuss today, but I'll quickly update today's current picture. Round 1 is in full swing with 20 of the 21 performance agreements signed. For our 8 planning projects, this means project development plans should be completed no later than October and November. We're getting excited about that, and we've heard from some grantees that those plans should be completed even sooner than that, and they can start working on their final reports. After the grantees have completed their projects, then ODO should start receiving final reports, and when we've gone through those and approved them, we'll be able to start paying out the grant funds. And we hope also that completed project plans will make excellent applications for future CREP construction grant applications. Another round 1 milestone is July 15th. This is the date that round 1 grantees have to submit their first quarterly report. We've started to receive those reports already, and those just give grantees an opportunity to update their program and alert us to any changes that we might need to discuss. And I'll go on and cover a little bit about round 2. The selections were announced for round 2 grantees on June 1st, and since then we've been communicating with the grantees and preparing the performance agreements. Those will go out to the grantees over the next couple of months. In fact, the first 2 were sent to grantees just yesterday, I believe. And the details about round 2 projects are in the update memo that was sent to the advisory committees. And of course, on our website, we've got the maps, all of the press release, and all the other documentation to inform you about all of the details of round 2, other than what's shown here on the screen. And that's it for the quick updates, and I'll pass it back to Jason.
All right, thank you, Clay. Before I jump into the round 3 update, just wanted to go back and say if we've had any committee members join us here after the presentation has started, if you would please raise your hand, and Stacy will get you moved from the attendee list over into our panelist list, just to make sure that we have you ready for to be able to take part in our discussion here in just a bit. But with that, I'll go ahead and jump into round 3 update. Currently, we are looking at an estimated launch either in the late summer or the early fall of this year. And that means that currently the program team is looking at various program and application adjustments before we get into that. Clay, if you'll go to the next slide. A few examples of those proposed adjustments, which are all stemming from lessons learned and feedback from both applicants, external reviewers, internal stakeholders within ODO, and even our advisory committee discussions from prior times. Our improvements to the program's outreach and engagement gaps by utilizing ODO's new Strategic Engagement Navigator. The CREP team is also continuing efforts to improve the application language and application requirements. And for example, we're looking at streamlining the process for all applicants to provide consistent budget and financial submissions for their projects. And this aids both in the eligibility and completeness review of projects submitted, as well as the competitive review of those projects for award selections. And in addition, following a careful review of submitted and awarded projects in the first 2 rounds, the program team recently has published guidance on eligible and ineligible costs as determined by ODO and program rules. And those are available on the webpage now under grantee resources. So both our prior grantees and current awardees and potential applicants, definitely please take a look at some of that updated guidance on eligible and ineligible costs. And then finally, excuse me, we are looking forward to doing an exploratory discussion on some potential ideas to update and improve the scoring criteria for projects that are published across all 4 opportunity announcements. And in addition, I saw that there was a question to Clay. Could you actually go back just for a moment? Could you go back 2 slides prior to this one? I think we had a question about showing this one again. I think it probably had to do with when we're proposing the round 3 launch. So again, we're looking right now at late summer to early fall of this year. And we'll just leave that up for just one moment, make sure everybody sees that. And then Clay, if you could go ahead and go 2 slides forward, please. And to wrap up today's team presentation, which we knew was going to be brief today, we wanted to update the committee and our public on the state's recent legislative session and the impact it's having on the Community Renewable Energy Grant Program. Clay, if you could go forward 1 slide for me, please. So this is all pending Governor Kotek's signature, but the legislature did approve House Bill 5506, which is the budget reconciliation bill, and that provides an additional $20 million to the CREP program, and that brings the total funding provided to our program to $70 million, up from $50 million. The other part that impacted the CREP program was Budget Bill, House Bill 5016, which also authorized the continued expenditure of funds through the CREP program. So that essentially says we can continue moving into rounds 3 and beyond with funding ready to go for those projects and grantees selected. And so with that, I know we have a couple of questions that are in the chat, which I don't have direct access to.
So the first question we've got from Alessandra is, do we know yet how long round 3 applications will be open?
We do not. We have not made that decision yet in terms of the application or the opportunity period. We do anticipate having that information just a little bit later this summer as we're putting the final plan together and the timelines together for round 3. Thank you for the question.
That's it for outstanding questions at the moment, Jason.
Okay, well, we'll go ahead just in case. Sometimes there could be some technical issues and people are thinking about stuff. If any of our members do have additional questions, please feel free to turn on mics and camera and ask those or put them in through chat. And Clay, if we've had any more come through that are member questions, please let me know.
Will do.
And then also let's make sure to public comments, let's make sure we hold those and get back to them during that time as well. But for now, let's go ahead.
We do have one new
Oh,
question.
Thank you,
Is
Clayton.
there an opportunity to request an increase to existing awards, or do we need to apply for round 3 funding to expand projects?
As it stands right now, on the first question, no, within CREP, there is not a portion built in to be able on an existing grant project to request additional funds for that project. On your second question, I would probably need to get more information on what the project means by extending a project. If that means you have an existing grant for the same project and you're looking at applying to ask for additional funds for that same project. As it stands with those details, no, that would not actually be an eligible project.
Right, and let's see, we do have another one where Jennifer's asked us to elaborate on the requirements for the budget and financial information. She writes, I have heard that too much info could unnecessarily or inappropriate pin down planning grants.
I think that would just be on a case by case. I'm not, maybe if we could maybe elaborate just a little bit more.
Sure, and I can try, take a stab at this too, Jason. So Jennifer and the rest of the attendees, we have designed, or the rules were written, following the legislation, the statute for this, and those requirements, although we have had some comments that, hey, you're asking for a lot for planning, but in reality, most of the financial information is if known and estimated. And so we encourage applicants to carefully read the instructions and the opportunity announcements when they come out, because even though it seems like we're asking for every detail, on the planning side, all of those details are only asked for as known, and applications can be successfully submitted and successfully compete with just the basic planning information that's known, because we understand, and the statute was written to understand, that for planning purposes, you're not going to know all the details. That's why you're asking for a planning grant. And so we think they've got that covered, and maybe in some of the language updates that Jason mentioned is a place where we can make that a little clearer in the next round of applications.
And also, as I went back, I was able to get access to the chat and read the question. Elaborating on the financial and budget requirements, what in effect we're talking about, just to address that part specifically, is in the third round, we are looking at developing and providing each applicant on the application a CREP created budget breakout for your project. And what the intention there is through each of the programs or through each of the rounds are some of our internal lessons learned, and through our reviewers going through the projects, is being able to get a more consistent and clear breakout of those costs and the finances attached to the projects. Is easier for reviewers to get a better snapshot and consistent view and assessment of all the projects. Currently, we ask for specific information on the application, and then oftentimes we're getting various types of budgets in different formats and in different budget requirements. And the idea here is to create one piece where you can still bring in that information, your own internal information, but we're looking at also trying to make this more streamlined and consistent across all the applications. And most of those budget and financial requirements are going to relate really more on the construction projects, not the planning projects, which already have a relatively basic input category for the planning projects. And that's because planning projects are for planning. That's their generalized costs under certain criteria that we want to see. So I hope between Clay and I's response that we were able to get a little bit more clarity there for you. All right, and before we move on, do we have any others, Clay?
I did, Jennifer had a follow-on and I just answered that in the chat because it was specific to her and her projects.
Okay. All right. Well, that was an excellent question.
Yeah, that's all I'm seeing at the moment.
Good follow-up. I think for the sake of moving forward, we'll go ahead and move into our discussion item. And before we get in, I just wanted to just give a quick reminder to the audience that we will have adequate time again for commentary at the end. But please use the raise hand function now to indicate if there's going to be interest in asking a question or making that comment. And then we will get to that following our discussion with the committee. Clay, if you go to the next slide, please. And we do ask, a little different than the last couple meetings, instead of having everybody turn their cameras on, we do have some additional slides to go through during this discussion period. But we do ask our members, if you are answering, asking, or responding to a question, please turn your camera and microphones on so that we can have that as a discussion within the presentation today. And Clay will go ahead and move into our next topic. So just as a quick lead in, we've seen this slide many, many times, but it's just going to lead into our discussion topic we wanted to explore with the committee today. And that was just a brief review of our legislative funding priorities. And that is 50% or more for grants to be awarded for planning or developing, or what we call construction, community renewable energy projects that qualify as community energy resilience projects, or those projects that are going to have a resilience aspect or components applied to that project. And then 50% or more for grants to be awarded for planning or developing community renewable energy projects that primarily serve one or more environmental justice communities. And I just wanted to go over that as we move into the next slide. And for our discussion today, we wanted to explore scoring criteria adjustments. Based on feedback from internal, external reviewers following the first 2 rounds of competitive review, the team has received the scoring criteria, or the team has returned back to the scoring criteria for each of the opportunity announcements to explore potential adjustments there. And the feedback from rounds 1 and 2 were requests made to provide better clarity to applicants and reviewers on the scoring criteria themselves as it relates to their projects for scoring, along with recommendations to provide more even, consistent scoring, and in this case across key project details and the program priorities that were set by the legislature back in 2021. Based on that feedback and the lessons learned internally, 2 areas that we're looking at exploring adjustments to are the combined scoring that comes with the project strength and the equity criteria categories, and as well as updating the criteria language descriptions for better clarity and guidance for our applicants and reviewers. And so for today's discussion, we wanted to get members' thoughts and feedback and insights on separating those scoring items in the project strength and the equity criteria, and putting each of those scoring opportunities into single individual scoring items. And so for the first one, we'll just go ahead and jump into the project strength. And so as you can see on screen here, the current way is we have 45 points combined, and several of those items come through for project team, operations plan, project description, financial plan, and then of course on construction projects, we have that construction plan. Each of these combines several questions across the application, and then at the end of scoring, reviewers are looking at then combining and giving a lump score up to 45 points for all of these various criteria. One of the adjustments the team has looked at and looking to explore is to break those out, as well as combine some of those related items into one scoring section to provide a more specific score against these key aspects to a project. And in this case, we'd be looking at or exploring a team score of 10, plan and schedule combined at 15, budget and finances also combined at 15. And then at the same time, going back to those legislative priorities, bringing the resilience aspects up into the scoring criteria for project strength across all projects, and bringing that in at a score of 10. And this would be both in planning and construction projects in a single criterion. And so I will just start with that one and see what some of the thoughts are from our committee members, pros, cons, or just general input or questions. Okay. Maybe we'll try going a little different if,
Alessandra has her hand up.
oh, good. Okay, excellent.
Thanks. Thanks, everyone. I think it sounds good so far for me to have a separate category for resilience aspects. I'm mostly wondering, how is that measured? Like, what are those metrics or what are those questions that are being asked? And I kind of have that question just in general with all of these 4 categories, just to kind of get a little bit more detail of what people are looking for when scoring this, and what makes a score higher or lower. So if there is any information about that, but overall, I think it is, it feels like a good way to be able to measure some more like resilience aspects of projects. But again, what does that kind of mean for y'all or for the grant makers who are actually reading through and scoring the applications?
Okay, I'll take the last part on the resilience aspects, and then I think Clay probably has the descriptions in the current OAs and some of the adjusted ones that we've been working with, or you can maybe give a little bit more specific information straight from the criteria for the opportunity announcement about questions that relate to team planning, schedule. One of the ideas that we came up with of bringing the resilience aspects up into project strength as its own score line there is both based on the legislative priorities, but the other piece is that in our current matrices, we in the renewable only projects, we actually don't have any resilience-based questioning, but you can actually apply in a renewable only project and have resilience components in that project for whatever reason. And so one of the ideas here is this is both a program priority and at the same time, this does allow people to be able to gain scores even in a renewable only, so that you're not immediately disqualifying or weighting those scores across the board. And Clay, do you want to maybe give a little bit more clarity on the specific line items and our combined for the other for team and schedule?
Sure. Did you have a follow-up, Alejandra? I see your hand is up. Or is that part of the same hand raise?
Yeah, it's just the same hand raise. I could put it down
Okay.
right now.
Okay.
And just to expand on the question too, is like, what's the definition of resilience that is being used here? Is it the same definition from the bill text itself, or are
Exactly.
resilience aspects being measured in a different way?
Nope, it's very specifically right out of the statute, and because it is so specific in, for this program, and I'm going to paraphrase just to keep things quick, but it is basically resilience is support to public structures or public servicing structures that support a community in the event of a grid outage. So it's a very specific definition of resilience, and folks can find that in the statute and also in the program rules. And as far as the scoring criteria and the questions that are asked, so we have the scoring criteria, which was previously created, and this is what we're talking about editing, which is in the opportunity announcements, and that's very specific, and it shows all the points, and it has kind of sort of summary language about what those points mean and how they're scored. But it really is, all of it points back to the specific questions or requirements of the application that are in section 2 of the opportunity announcements about what make a complete application. And that's where anybody can read all of those specific requirements of an application and all of the detailed questions we're asking. And so what we want people to do, and in our training videos and other guidance, we're asking folks then to relate the application requirements to the scoring criteria. And that's how an applicant can make sure that their projects are making the strongest, are built in the strongest way to target this grant, if you will. Not the application, but the project itself. So that way, when you're answering questions in the application, it relates back to your actual project plan and then relates to the scoring criteria that's also in the opportunity announcement. And of course, all of that, the opportunity announcement, all of that goes back to the Oregon Administrative Rule that the OA, that the opportunity announcements were written from, and then the Oregon Administrative Rules report back to the statute that created the program itself. And you can follow that language all the way through to the scoring criteria and to the application.
All right. Thank you so much.
Alessandra, do you have any follow-up with that?
No, I think that's good. I might have follow-up later, but
Okay.
glad to continue having the discussion.
Right, and I also did want to make sure that I wanted to make sure that I also say that our purpose here with these discussions, is to have this initial discussion with committee members, and then upon our discussion and feedback, if advised, we've been looking to move forward with creating that final scoring criteria change and scoring changes and line items that then we would send out to members to be able to review that as well prior to going into a future round, whether that be round 3 or further out. So I want to make sure that this is really an exploratory discussion, and then we've put a few ideas together to try to solicit some feedback and input on that. So we appreciate your question. Do any of the other members have a question or some feedback, pro or con?
Jason, Jenny's hand is up.
Okay. And Jenny, if you're able to go on camera, please do. If not, we understand.
I am. Can you hear me? Can you see me okay?
I
We can hear you. Yeah.
How are you doing?
Good. How are you doing? Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Clay. I think this is a good good addition. I think that the including resilience aspects is a great idea at this level. I'm wondering if at this point it's kind of a technical component there. You're asking for the teams to share resilience from the technical aspect, and then maybe like the communities being served would be showing up later in the document under the other sections. Is that how it's going to be split out?
Yeah, those other sections, the scoring criteria from that was put together from this committee addressed those areas that was in statute carried over to rule. So there are no scoring criteria items that are being changed or removed. We're just looking at creating line item scoring over key project details, and then you'll see in the next slide over some of the equity details, so that we're not looking at these lump sum scores. These would be scored on specific aspects, related aspects, as reviewers go through a particular project. So there's no questions being changed on the application. There's no other scoring criteria that are being removed. We may have some point adjustments on some of those other line items to help create that even consistency across applications and project types. But in this case, the idea to move the resilience aspects up, it was its own question or its own line item score within the resilience projects for planning and construction. In this iteration, we're looking at bringing that into the project strength area because it's an overriding goal of the program, and making that a part of the project strength scoring category, but then also including it across all projects in all 4 opportunity announcements. And did that answer your question or?
Well, let me add in a little, Jason, just back to the definitions of resilience and, separating out resilience related to the community and EJ communities versus technical, they really are combined. And that's in the definitions too, where I'll just read it right out of the definition, where the community energy resilience means the ability of a community to maintain the availability of energy needed to support the provision of energy-dependent critical public services to the community following non-routine disruptions of severe impact or duration to the state's broader energy systems. So it's combining public welfare service and the technical aspects of providing that power in a grid outage. And yes, there are other questions though that get more into the details, and scoring that get more into the details of the support and involvement of the environmental justice communities.
And then one other part, Jenny, is that yes, that there are included in the scoring of this is not just, yes, this is a resilience-based project. There obviously in the application, there's going to be technical information about that project or planned project that also goes to weight into a reviewer's assessment and scoring of the resilience aspects, and with each of these individual items as well.
Great, that's really helpful context and clarification. The steps you've taken to break out those lump sum points, I think, will be very helpful for applicants. And I think some of the context that you're providing, I imagine it will probably show up in the longer form document, kind of where you are describing what you mean by what information is you want to be provided in each of these sections. For instance, under the current kind of model, operations plan is listed. That's not really clear what that means. And are we talking about how the facility is going to be operated once it's constructed, or are we talking about how the team is going to be operating? Things like that. So providing some clarity in what is the intended information, and then what will get you a higher score versus a lower score, because I imagine it's not all or nothing in any of these categories.
Right. Yeah, and so two things with that, Jim, is that obviously in our scoring criteria packed into the OAs, the description of the line item is always going to be condensed to the basics of what we would be looking at, and that our competitive reviewers would be scoring against. But I think also as one piece of this, we're looking at updating those descriptions as well to provide even more clarity of exactly what are we talking about versus the information on the application that we'll be looking at and then scoring. And then lastly, on your very last comment, our aim in the program is not necessarily to guide scores with very, very specific, if it's this is the score. If it's this is the score. There's, part of the program is to bring in those competitive reviewers that have asked to be a part of that review. And utilize their experiences, their backgrounds, their take on these applications and projects, and bring their own scoring within our guidelines to those final scores. And within that, we feel like we get a very balanced and wide-ranging assessment of these scores And that's probably also a good thing to just make sure. We like to keep saying this within the program, especially with our public here, is that the CREP program grantees are not selected by ODO in specific. We have a competitive review made up of citizens and internal reviewers within CREP that go through and do these reviews of the projects, score these, and then we put those score matrix together. So sorry, I wanted to add that in, Jenny, because I always like to keep throwing that out. I think some people don't always understand how these projects within CREP are actually selected in the end.
Thank you.
Okay. And do we have any other comments on the project strength side of this discussion for a potential change? Okay, we'll go ahead and move into the next one. I know we're running just a little bit over on our time. So Clay, if you could go to the next screen. And similar to the project strength, in our program priorities, our equity category and our scoring criteria in the OAs, our current setup is on our renewable only projects, we have a total score of 15 or a combined total score of 15. And on the resilience projects, a combined score of 10 points. And in this section, we have that location, the community served, the community leadership involved in the projects, not just the project team that we saw in Project Strength, community partnerships and outreach, as well as an equity framework. And one of the things we're exploring here is similar to Project Strength, where we would be taking the related areas of that those equity and EJ community-based questions and combining them again in single line item scoring to create that even and consistent scoring across the group of questions and responses we receive for these particular items as they relate back to our equity program priorities and service of EJ communities. So we'll to open it up in the same. If anyone has any question or comments from our members here on this area. Okay. While we're waiting on maybe a particular question come in, with our committee members, if we could use the chat, and if you feel like either of these, exploring these and then getting some more information on what the team is exploring and looking at, but see that there might be some value in this and agree that at least looking at that as a change might be a positive here. If you could use the chat and use one of the icons and give us a thumbs up or potentially even give us a thumbs down there, just so we can get some engagement from our members today.
And Jason, while they're doing that, Jennifer Jolly is asking in the chat, do you publish who the reviewers are and do they vary each round?
We do. Within each round, we do have some reviewers that come back on that we have had 2 or 3 reviewers that were involved in both round 1 and round 2. Within that, we intentionally tried in round 2 to move them into different categories that they were not involved in the first round. But our process is that you have to apply to be an external reviewer for the CREP program. And in terms of publishing who the reviewers are, no, it's not something we keep the internal records out there. These are always going to be private citizens that come and apply for that. And so they come in and give us their best and unbiased opinions, and then we take those scores and move them into our system to get our final score results from both our external reviewers and the selected internal ODO reviewers.
We also have a public process of volunteering to be an external reviewer. And so, that's always posted on our website when that opportunity is announced. and all the criteria and details of that are posted.
Okay. Well, for the sake of time and making sure that we have some time for our public commentary, we can always, with the committee, have you have maybe a little more time to digest this and maybe communicate back via email any comments or ideas. But Clay, if we can go ahead and move into the next slide.
Jason,
Sure.
I did put
did I
my
miss?
hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't see
You're
all the
good.
screens on there.
And then Alessandra, when Alessandra's done with her question, I'm going to take a question from Toby from the chat. So go ahead, Alessandra.
Yeah, I just mostly wanted to get clarity on this adjustment. So it used to be that the categories were all just lumped together and would get a total of 10 or 15 points for whether it's resilience or renewable. And now you're actually breaking them up into the 5.5, 5, 2.5. Is there a reason why the equity framework was a 2.5? It's also a little bit hard for my brain to capture things when I don't know exactly like what questions are being asked, right? For like the EJ community outreach or plan, what makes a really good one, what makes, not a really good one. And so just wanting to get a little bit more context of like, why the equity framework is 2.5, but also like what does the equity framework mean for ODO and when the reviewers are going through the applications?
Yeah, and I think so. First off, is that breaking this up really just allows, based on the related information and response in the application for that particular item, such as is this located in an environmental justice community? Is this primarily serving? Is this project primarily serve an environmental justice community, which would be the impact on that community? That would become that single score, combined single score item. And then the same example through the outreach or the plan to engage the public. And in the current iteration, as you described, we can have reviewers going through 12 to 15 questions with a lot of information that's revolving around the environmental justice impact across the board, but some has more specificity and details. In some cases, some of that information is maybe it's not directly related, but there's still information there. But in the end, a reviewer gets to the end of that and has to score all of that. And then you're thinking, okay, now it's what's our roundabout score? In this case, in this type of a change, you can go through those items as you're reviewing the application responses, and you can apply relatively accurate scoring, which will then come to that combined score. And we just, our intent there and our thought was it really does, same with the project strength area. It creates more specific and consistent and even scores across these priority sections of the application. The equity framework 2.5 score there, that's listed at 2.5 because to get to a couple of these scores, we have to tweak some of the other scoring down the line through the criteria. This would not necessarily be a final at this point. It's just where in our matrix that we were playing with, this is where that one came out. One reason why is that equity framework as an item moving through the various public bodies throughout the country and the state is still a relatively new concept in terms of already having that in place, utilizing that into a specific project. And so one of the reasons we were looking at that, including that but at that lower score, was also to create a little bit more balance between public bodies who have those resources and have already been on top and moving through, and some of those entities that are maybe still working their way into these programs, but obviously understand these grant programs here, federal, need that information, and they are requirements for grant submissions now.
In the application, it is basically kind of a yes/no question in the statute, and then it relative in the application. Does your program have an equity framework or use an equity framework in this project? or related to this project, will it apply a policy or an actual equity framework? Yes or no. And that's why we gave it that score, because it's just a kind of a blank question. And if you look, we've divvied up what used to be 10 or 15 points now into a 17.5 point total. And again, each scoring criteria is going to be a 100-point total. And that was, in that balance and adjustment.
Alessandra, did you feel like we were able to answer that for you? Did you have a
Oh
or a
yeah,
follow-up?
no, that was perfect. Thanks so much for that, and that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I agree with this type of adjustment. As someone who's read grants before, it's nice to be able to have more specifics, and even when you're talking in the full group, being able to go back to your notes and have those like really specific of why you maybe their community impact is great, but their community outreach seems to be lacking, right? And being able to touch on those things. This is more of just a kind of like general process for reviewers, but do reviewers get examples of what like a good community outreach plan is, or what Odo is considering as an equity framework? Just so like as reviewers are going through it, that they have kind of that that like example of what a successful kind of community outreach plan would look like. Or equity framework, like is this place accessible, like is it ADA, is it right, like just so that the reviewers also have kind of like are on the same page of what that might mean.
When we go through with each reviewer to provide provide our initial guidance through the program, they are provided with a lot of the details about what is driving the program, the benefits, the priorities and the benefits. But the other part of this is that we also try to take a step back and not influence those reviewers and their scoring. And so in a lot of fact, to answer your question, we are open to receive questions for more clarification, or where they could go find that information, or what they may expect to see. But we actually try not to be very influential in that, because program team is also some of the reviewers, the internal reviewers for the projects as well. So we have to walk a very fine line about providing guidance, but also not being influential, to ensure that we have unbiased scoring and flexible scoring at the end of each opportunity round.
Yeah, thank you for that. I know that could be it could be, difficult to try to walk that line and try to remain kind of like as unbiased as you can and like mitigate those things. I do think that sometimes it is good to have not everyone works in like equity work or in community engagement and things like that. So sometimes I do think to have just like a basic understanding that all reviewers could have would be good. But I think just for right now, at the topic at hand, I do like this adjustment. Thank you.
Thank you, Alessandra. Appreciate it. Clay, did you have any follow-up with that?
No, I've got one question, just a quick one from the chat. For projects turned down, do you offer a debriefing? And the answer is yes. We contact everybody whose application was not selected and offer to meet with them, or offer them our own analysis of where they had weaknesses and where they had strengths in the competitive review process against their competitors. So yes, we do provide that debriefing. And I'm running through the questions real quickly. We have, do you know the completion date for round 3 construction projects yet? No. That will be a long time off, because once we have a contract signed, or as we call it, a performance agreement, construction grantees have 3 years from the date of signature to complete their the construction of their renewable energy system. So Scott, if you need more details on that, please reach out to us at our email, community.grants@oregon.energy.gov. And we'll post that too in the slideshow at the end.
Okay, and I do see another question from Jennifer. Does Odo consider whether applicants have already received grants in previous rounds versus new applicants? Again, each opportunity round is an individual, a separate round. And so various entities can apply for a new grant in a subsequent round, even if they were awarded a grant in the prior one. But as we had mentioned earlier on another question, that application project cannot be for additional funding for the same project that was already awarded. It would have to be for a new and different project, or potentially some kind of a substantial expansion of an existing project. And Clay, did you have any clarification
Well,
on that
did you,
one?
did you mention the diversity aspect of the scoring that could affect repeat locations and?
And yeah, built
Okay.
into the scoring criteria is another scoring item of project diversity. So of course, in the review process, it would be up to individual reviewers to decide if a program that they knew had already been prior awarded around in a prior round, if that would impact the overall diversity, and whether they would give a lower or an equivalent score there would be up to that individual reviewer. And then potentially would show up across the mean average of all those reviews. And there's another question in. I think we're probably going to wind up wrapping up here in a moment with kind of a combination of our public and our member questions here. We apologize for that. We went a little over. And Susan asked, could you include for both the reviewer and applicant a template that would say, to effect 0 does not at all answer the question, or 2 is somewhat, basically to that, if I have that paraphrased. That actually does occur when we do our initial meetings with the competitive reviewers prior to the competitive review process. We do walk through some of those items without getting into specific details of a prior application that would be this or that, but we address it more from a way with Clay and I of what we were looking for, what the program is looking for based on responses. And then also just our experience of applications where we've seen, very specific and on-target responses, as well as responses that are, that are trying to answer that particular question, but it's not really related to answering that question. And we just try to guide them in awareness of that, and then apply their scoring appropriately as they see fit. And so I think with that, did we have any other public questions in there? I know that we're a couple minutes over right now.
Jason, there is one from Toby. He says there has been a historic unwillingness to develop green hydrogen projects in Oregon. If a solar green hydrogen storage fuel cell system, which provides both electricity and clean fuel, were proposed, would it be considered?
Clay, you want to go on that one on our?
Yeah, we'd have to look at the specifics of what was being proposed, but energy storage is one of our eligible technologies. The fuel would not be, because our technologies are for energy that is thermal or electric. And combustible fuels, even in clean fuels, I don't think qualify, but we'd have to look at the specifics on the energy storage part and providing the electricity. As long as that energy storage is paired with a renewable energy generation system, that is right out of the statute. So please take a look at the opportunity announcements and at the program rules, the Oregon administrative rules for our program. All the links on our website, and you can match up the rules for authorized technologies and their deployment with your project.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Toby. It's definitely something we'd love to take a look at with a little bit more detail in an offline capacity, and be able to answer your question a little more specifically. And Sarah, I know we're We're coming here towards the end. Apologize to our public. I hope we were able to address the public questions coming in without the segue between our discussion and public commentary time. But we are coming up on our 1 hour time frame and just wanted to quickly touch on for members still here with us. Our next steps are going to be continuing these round 3 adjustments and getting the opportunity announcements through our system and approved, ready for a round 3 launch, as I said, later in the summer or early fall. As well, as we mentioned before in the presentation, we'll be continue tracking our round 1 and round 2 grantee and projects, as well as doing report verifications and any follow-up and updates that come with those reporting requirements for our grantees. And then obviously in full mode to do preparation and get ready for our round 3 launch. And just for everybody's tentative schedule, we will be looking at having our next advisory committee meeting to cover the 3rd quarter of this year in September. That would probably be looking more towards the mid to late end of September, and we'll make sure we get updates out ahead of that. Based on our discussion today, Clay and I will move forward with putting a little more information together on these scoring criteria changes and get that information out to you with a little bit more detail for some continued discussion in the offline space. And with that, Clay, if you could go to the next slide, please. Next slide, please. We kind of combined it all today. For anyone else here, if you're not familiar with the ODO's website and how to find the CREP program, just go to oregon.gov/energy. And in the left column under the incentives, you'll see the Community Renewable Energy Grant Program. Click on that, and that'll take you directly to our incentive programs webpage, where you can find some of the guidance and information, a lot of applicant details if you're looking at doing a round 3 application, and even for our grantees or partners working with grantees. Please review that information on there. And Clay, if we could go one more slide. And then if any questions do come up, I know we had a little shortened time with our public comment. On our CREP page, we do have a Q&A portal that's open to anyone. So if we somehow missed you or ran out of time for a question, please feel free to go to the CREP webpage, and you'll see that questions tab and to submit a question through that Q&A portal. And we will definitely get back in touch with you and make sure that we take that time to answer questions, since we ran out of some time today, and we do apologize for that. And Clay, if we could go ahead and move into our final slide. Just want to say thank you to everybody for taking the time today. Thank you for our advisory committees, both for your service to the CREP program and for taking part in these meetings and discussions. As always, if there was something that was following this meeting, if you'd like to share in an offline capacity, please certainly let Clay or I know. And with that, we just want to also thank our public for coming in and spending time with us today. And again, because of our mistake on the format and running out of time, if you have questions, please use the website format or portal and ask us your question. We will definitely be more than happy to get back in touch with you immediately. And with that, just want to say thank you again. Thank you to the ODO team that was in the background helping us out today, as well as the program team. And with that, thank you very much, and we're going to sign off.